Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Coach's Corner, a discussion by coaches and industry experts on challenges, trends, and paths forward as we navigate the life of business. My name is Mike Lamb of, of FocalPoint Business Coaching Utah, and with me is Adam Gaheb, my partner here of FocalPoint Business Coaching of Cary. Today, we have a special guest with us, Keith Bryza of FocalPoint Business Coaching of Arizona. Keith, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's your background.
Cool. Thanks for having me, guys. This is very exciting. I appreciate being the first guest on your podcast. It's
All
awesome.
right.
My name's Keith Bryza, as Mike said. I've been in the coaching game for about a little over 6 months, probably. But before that, I have a deep history in leadership and coaching from my career past, right?
Right, right.
So when I was a younger guy, I was an Air Force officer for 21 years. Uh, a lot of opportunity for leadership and command in that arena. So that's where I started. I think my coaching career was
Mhm.
back when I was 26, 27 as a young lieutenant, not knowing what I was doing, but over the years, honing those skills. Retired in 14, got out and worked for a company called Harris,
Mm.
a DoD contractor as an executive for them. We merged with L3 to become L3 Harris, one of the largest DoD contractors out there. And then around 2022, I jumped ship and went into the education industry, where I
Oh,
spent 2 years as a VP for them. And so a lot of opportunities during that career uh, that spanned over that time frame for leadership and coaching. Coaching was probably the backbone of that those career sets.
mm.
And so when I left in structure, I kind of took a knee and said, what I want to do with the rest of my life when I grow up, right? What do I want to do when I grow up? And I settled on coaching just because of that background and the feeling you get whenever you see people progress and grow as you coach them along and whatever it is, leadership, business,
Right.
executives, and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Love to hear the story. We have a great topic today that we want to discuss. So let's jump right in. I'm going to ask you a question here that'll lead
Cool.
us right into our topic. So what is the biggest misconception in the industry of coaching that you've seen?
I think the biggest misconception, and I've run into this a lot. People will say to me when I say that I'm an executive coach, a business coach, they'll say, "So when did you start consulting?" And I'll say, the biggest misconception is that we're consultants, right? We'll
Right.
come in and we'll fix your problems. You sit over in the corner, you pay us, and we make everything okay, and then we leave. That's not what we do as coaches, and I think that's the biggest misconception. If you're familiar with the Bible and Jesus, like most people are, we teach people to fish. We don't fish for them, if you
That's
will.
right.
So we come in and we offer advice and we offer guidance, and we help them to become what they need to do with their business, whether that be leadership, growing the revenue, increasing their sales staff, whatever that may be. We help them to realize that and to progress that forward, if that makes sense.
Keith, that's absolutely spot on. That's something that I see a lot, especially when you start off in the coaching business and people say, "Hey, why did you jump ship and do something different?" Right? You have to answer that question. But then the next question is, "Well, what is coaching? What is
Exactly.
what does it really mean?" And I also deal with the are you a contractor? And part of what we do, especially if it's in our background of our past life, does have a little bit of a contractor or a consulting feel to it. But you're absolutely spot on. It's about teaching someone how to fish and making sure that they can better themselves and better
Yeah.
their situation. One of
Yeah.
those things that I always talk to clients through, and I said, listen, if I'm successful, more importantly, if we're successful, you're going to fire me,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that's going to be a good day for me, right?
Yeah. I want you to
As
have no need for me, right? Yeah, absolutely.
as
Absolutely.
crazy as that sounds,
Yeah.
then that means we will have done our job, right?
Yeah. And there are a lot of folks out there who need that. And I think a lot of, when you break it down to the very basics, when you first bring on a brand new client, um, it's it's all about the communication part, not only with you and your
Oh,
client,
sure.
but teaching them to
Yeah.
communicate with everybody around them, right? And so again, that misconception is you're going to come in and fix things for me. And it's like I'm basically going to start right at the very first with teaching you how to communicate, not only with me, but with the clients that your staff that you're working with,
Absolutely.
your clients that they have, right? So it's all about that communication piece. When I was in the military, we had a saying. It was all about moving, shooting, and communicating. That communicating piece was the key to everything, whether you're talking to an aircraft, people on the ground, or even through email. Communication is key. And if you can't have that communication, or you can't master that communication, things fall apart very quickly. So that's the very basic step of the coaching practice that I always try to highlight is we're going to learn how to communicate, not only with me as a coach, but as all of your other folks out there that you need to communicate with on a daily basis. So I think that's very, very important.
What are you seeing, Mike?
Just really love that communication piece. It's so important. And and the question I get a lot is that are you in there telling people or coaching people on what they're doing wrong?
Yeah.
Right.
Do you hear
How
that
do you
often?
answer
I've
that?
heard that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tough question. When you coach somebody, coaching doesn't just narrow down to this is what you're doing incorrectly in your business. It's so much more than that, right? It's why are you constantly in a bad mood on Monday mornings? I mean, it goes all the way. It's a lot deeper than just, hey, this is where your revenue is falling off, and this is how we can help you with that. It's,
Yeah.
why are you feeling the way you're feeling when you're coming into work that's causing your whole staff to recognize that you're angry every Monday morning and they stay away from you, and that communication is hindered from the very first part of the week. And it's like, so that's what you have to understand is part of what we do. So it's not just, hey, fix this for me. It's a much broader picture. And when you start peeling back that onion, I realize not everybody likes onions. Whenever you start looking at that parfait, right?
Yeah. Shrek, I like it. Donkey.
Right? You quickly go, okay, I need to understand what's going on with this individual. And there's a lot of ways to get to that part of the process. And I always start with the psychometric profile. As you guys know, it's the DISC profile that we like to use. And in that profile, I like to use the emotional intelligence piece to that, right? So that they can understand who they are. And I always like to use this, right? When I was a young captain, they sent us these captain's books. And The Art of War was one of the captain's books. It's
Right.
the only one I read, as a matter of fact, because it was cool. I was like, oh, these other ones like reading. But I read this book, and in chapter 1, Sun Tzu says, "Know thyself." Right. So in order to be successful in any part of your life, your business, whether that's the family part of leadership, the business part of what you're trying to do, it's know thyself. If you don't know yourself, it's almost impossible to be successful. So you start from the very beginning, like I said, from the basics. You do the psychometric profile of know thyself. So your client is going to get to know themselves very, very well. And then they're going to get to know the enemy, Sun Tzu, not my words, but who their workers are, who their coworkers are, right? Know everybody else. That intelligence that they have with themselves and who they work with is huge. And then build a communication. How do I communicate with those people? That's the very basics, right? So back to your question, Mike. I mean, I think it's pretty it's complex. I mean, right? There's a lot of stuff going on there. And part of our job as coaches is to understand all of those moving parts and to put them together for the client so that they can understand it and they can be successful. Hope that makes sense.
So you would go as far as to say it's not just business coaching, it's personal development as well, and coaching.
100%. Absolutely. When you start looking at the individuals, because everybody is a different individual, every client that you take on is going to be different. There might be similarities, and there might be huge differences. So we have to adjust to that. And when you realize, again, if you know yourself and your capabilities and your strengths and weaknesses, it just translates to what you're trying to do with your clients. So those clients are going to be completely different. Their situations are going to be different. Oftentimes, when I start that process, I do the psychometric profile. We figure out what their personality is. And then I also take it one step further using that emotional intelligence. I figure out what their leadership style is. What is your leadership style? And there's 10 leadership styles out there, really 8, but they keep adding to them every single year.
Of course
that
they
leadership
do.
style, right, is very important because when you understand your leadership style, you can then go, well, shoot, I'm this type of personality and this is my leadership style as a default. So in order to deal with the people that I have underneath me, because remember, leadership is about taking care of your people, right? It's not people
Should be.
follow me. It's no, I work for these people. I'm at the very top of the food chain. It is my responsibility for the caring and feeding and education and everything that they need to be successful, not only in the business, but in life. That's
Absolutely.
your responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And so when you understand what type of leader you are, your emotional intelligence, where that comes from, um, and I can go all day about emotional intelligence leadership, but I like
It's
to
fascinating
really,
stuff,
I
right?
like to really dig into that and say, this is what we're working with right now, and this is how we can help you move forward with really that, again, that communication piece with your workers and how you need to communicate with them on a daily, hourly basis, right? So,
So, Keith, you just touched on two things, and you started off this by saying know thyself, right? And that's perfect because that is our starting point. That is our starting block. That is where we kind of kick things off with coaching in general. But then you summarized to it, but let's bring it back to some of the kind of the focal point systems. Know thyself,
yep.
and then know thy business, right? Because what you're talking about there is the awareness. Now you have this self-awareness, and then you're taking that knowledge that you've learned and you're looking back or looking into the overall business. You're peeling back the onion slash parfait.
Yeah.
And and now you're looking at the business, and those goals are simple. Who are you serving? What value are you providing? And where are they located, right? It's really about those understanding pain points of that's where we kind of jump things off, right?
Yep, absolutely. And as you say, it's like as coaches, we're leading our clients to the conclusions. We're not providing those conclusions for them.
That's
We're
right.
peeling back that onion. We're
That's right.
asking very difficult questions that are pointing in that direction so that they can realize what needs to be accomplished and what we're kind of, leading them to. So that's part of the coaching thing.
I think it's kind of a partnership, and that's what makes it
Absolutely.
so rewarding and so fascinating, right? Because we get to observe, we get to lead. People start to uncover things that they didn't truly believe and they didn't know were there. I don't know about you two, but whenever I speak with someone, the first thing they say is, I want to grow. And
Yeah.
then you always dig. Well, what does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
That means I want more clients, I want more revenue. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, why?
It's like
Right?
it's the same thing. It's like, why did you become a coach? Well, I really want to help people. What does that
uh,
mean? What really does that mean? Right? It's the same
Yeah.
concept. It's the same thing. So yeah,
right.
absolutely.
But you're constantly peeling back because there's underpinnings as to why people want certain things. And that leads into wants versus needs. And how do you assign goals? How do you help them set goals? How do you help them
Yep.
set priorities? Right.
Yep.
It's fascinating when you think about the behavioral sciences and how they kind of play with the decision making process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, how do you use those outside of just communication pieces?
Explain. What do you mean?
So, you know, every person is different. They consume information differently. They articulate and communicate differently. So, in theory, there isn't a one size fits all for
Absolutely.
communication. Your
Yep.
step one piece of
Yeah.
your know thyself and therefore know how to communicate out. So, how do you, as a coach, kind of manipulate and change your communication styles
Sure.
based on those behavioral sciences that you were just discussing?
Yeah. So if we look back at the DISC assessment, that psychometric profile, if you will, of what your DNA is and what someone else's DNA is. If you have that capability, right? When you work with a client, that's there. Hey, I want you to take this test. You know what yours is. Now you know what theirs is. That's easy to build that communication. Um, but as you start to realize the the emotional intelligence piece that has to go with that, right? And emotional intelligence is, as you guys know, but for the audience, the emotional intelligence is I'm very aware of my feelings. I'm very
Right.
aware of the way Adam is making me feel and how I need to react to how Adam
Which is awesome.
right.
Yeah.
So that's emotional intelligence on me. And then that's the self part. And then there's the other part. How does my emotion relate to Adam? How does it make him feel? Right.
Right.
This face
Right.
versus this face. Right. So once you understand your emotional intelligence and how that affects others around you, as well as yourself, but mostly the others around you, that if I don't like the word manipulation, but it's a perfect descriptor of what you're trying to do there. I want someone to feel good. So I'm going to project this smiley face and a great attitude because I want them to feel good.
Right.
I want them to feel stressed and bad because they did something really wrong. Like, like it's kind of like when you come home from work and the dog is knocked into the trash and he's scattered it all over the house. And it happened 2 hours ago, but if you don't act accordingly, then he's going to do it again, right? So you have to put on the
Right. Yeah.
face, you have to yell, bad doggy, go sit in the corner. You don't feel like doing that, but that's what you have to do in order to convey the message that was bad, right? Now, one thing that I always tell my clients, once you give the bad doggy, you must always go back and give the good doggy later on when it's appropriate, right? So if someone does something wrong in your office, or you're the leader, and you must discipline, however that is, bad doggy, but you always need to go back around again, whether that's an hour later, the next day, the next morning, at the end of the day, whatever that is, and make sure they understand why you reacted the way you did, that they're a great person, worker / whatever, and to make sure that they know that you're okay with it, right? This is the reason I reacted the way I did. It's okay. I love you. It's going to be okay. Go get him, Tiger, kind of thing. And I always make sure that I do that. And that was taught to me at a very, very young age as an officer. When you give this bad doggy, and it was described exactly like that too. For every bad doggy that you give, you must go back and give a good doggy to make sure that everything is okay. And it's not, hey, I apologize for yelling at you. It's always, it's like when you discipline your dog. It's a good boy. You're okay. Good boy.
Yeah.
And that is huge. And you'll notice whenever you do that emotional intelligence on your dog, it is very effective. I mean, once they hear that tone and that, and you're okay with it now with what they did, everything is great. Everything is fine in their world again. So that's what you want to convey to your folks. Hope that
That's one of the great things about the DISC assessment is it brings self-awareness. That's one of the steps. Yes. And so your behaviors are intentional or more intentional, or you're more aware of those things. And I coach my clients on that all the time. You need to be aware of what you're conveying and how you're conveying that message, because it could be read differently depending on your behavior style.
Funny story. I'm sorry, Adam.
No, please. No, go.
Funny story. So I came from the military, right? TACP, the whole 9 yards, and combat operator, that kind of thing. Went into the DoD industry for 8 years, and it was very, a lot of military in there. So my Zoom face was this, right? And so when I came to work for Instructure, 180 degrees out from what I'm used to, they're a gentleman's group, right? No one's military. We're all about education and improving people's knowledge and all this great stuff. But my Zoom face was still this. And they knew I was a military guy. So they were like, I think I was the only military guy in the company, right? And so they're like, no, this guy kind of scares me. So I had the emotional intelligence in me was like, I'm projecting the wrong persona here. I need to be like this. And so people don't think that I'm this mean, tough guy. I'm going to make them do push-ups the whole time they're talking to me on the Zoom. And so, that's part of that emotional intelligence. Like you said, when you do your DISC profile with your client, it's a great opportunity, because the cool thing about emotional intelligence is that you can improve on that piece. You can improve your emotional intelligence. And so working with them on a regular basis to go, hey, be aware of this. This is what you're projecting, and make sure that you, especially the high dominant folks that rate in that DISC assessment, right?
Sorry, guys.
Very aware. I have a client. He's a great client, fantastic guy. And he is high dominance, and everybody's afraid of him because it's just his personality. And whenever they get called into his office for whatever it is, hey, I need to talk to you about the upcoming brief that's going to happen. They're afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. Oh my God, what did I do? As they walk into his office. So we're having the discussion of, that's the emotional intelligence that you project on others. That's what they see. So you, as a leader, need to project something else other than that, right? And it can be very subtle. It can be very, not going outside your personality and being not like you, so to speak. But it's the awareness. It's all the way back to that communication. Am I communicating properly with my nonverbal cues to let everybody know that I'm okay, it's okay, it's a safe space, that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
So that was a perfect story. Before I get into my comment, just so you've mentioned DISC a few times, right? And you've mentioned a couple personality types or traits within DISC. So just so that everyone is aware, DISC is 4 different traits, right? Dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. Ready? DISC. Perfect, right? Just so that we're clear there. Now, we had talked about, the way that we're speaking, the smile on our face, the reflection, the cadence of our voice. We're missing something though. Body language has such
Yeah.
a massive, massive influence on
Yeah.
the way that we are received, right? You were
Yeah.
talking about your angry military face, right?
Yep, that's it.
Or arms crossed, sit back, not really paying attention. But that's very much a different story than leaning in, smiling, engaged, eye contact, right? It's a combination of your awareness, not just with the verbal and the communicative, methods of
Yeah.
our speech patterns, but it's our aura, it's our vibe in general. Now,
Yeah.
one quick follow-up, because I know we're getting there, but Keith, do you think it changes when you're over a meeting like this, Zoom? I mean, you're in Arizona, Mike's in Utah, I'm in Carolina, right? I mean, how does that play across something like this?
Well, it can have a major impact on it, just depending on your audience and what you want to get out of your audience and want to make them feel, right? So you've noticed, I mean, I'm a high eye. You've noticed my hands moving around all over the place and lots of gestures and things like that. I much prefer being in person because that works for me. And I like to be in that area where people can see my body language, right? It also works the other way around if you're in a tough meeting, if you're negotiating, if you're playing poker, right? So a lot of negotiating meetings are all about the poker face. I know what I can go up to. I don't want to leave anything on the table. This is the way I need to be in that Zoom meeting. So
Right.
when I coach my clients, it's that same thing. Are we going into a play poker, or are we going into a social arena? So this would be a social arena, right? We're talking and we're having a good time. But when you go into, we're contract negotiating, we're trying to figure out our price. That's when you want to have your poker face on. So that body language is extremely important with that, right?
Mm.
And if you're high, eye, and you're very, mobile around, you have to really concentrate on that. But if your emotional intelligence is pretty high and you are aware of what you need to do, then it's actually, I don't want to say fun, but it's easy to do, and
It's a
it
game.
gets, yeah, it's the game. It's the game we play, right? Absolutely.
It's
Can I
something you can
accurately
adapt
read
to.
you, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's cool.
Awesome. Awesome. Listen, that was absolutely fascinating. We took a few twists and turns, but that's kind of what coaching is, right?
Yeah.
Respond, react, and that's how you become a good active listener,
That's
which
right.
is so paramount to us to truly being able to. I'm gonna morph this, peel back the parfait,
Yeah.
and and really get to the underpinnings of exactly what people are trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I take good notes, and I'm always, since most of my coaching, all of my coaching is on Zoom, I'm always making sure that my clients understand and are aware that when I'm doing this, I'm taking notes. And
Yeah.
I always refer back to those notes. And I always like you talked about active listening. The active listening part is when I read back those notes or I ask those questions, and it says, I heard from you, you said this. Tell me more about that. So
Mm.
I actively try to communicate back to them what their stress points are, what they told me, so that we can move that communication forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's perfect. That's a great way to wrap things up here. Thanks, Keith, for sharing. We're
Yeah.
gonna title this the parfait episode of
The
Coach's
parfait.
Corner.
Outstanding. That's awesome.
That's a nice boulder.
That's a nice boulder.
Yeah.
Perfect, man. That's awesome.
Well, for those listening, please, reach out on LinkedIn or email or schedule a time to chat with any one of us. And we have topics coming up that we're excited to share, and let us know if there's anything that you would like us to cover. Please drop us your interests and we'll discuss them in future episodes. And thanks everyone for being on.
Yeah, thanks
Keith,
for having me,
once
guys. I
again,
really
so
appreciate it.
much. Thank you so much for having us. And
Yes.
everyone, once again, that's Keith Bryza, FocalPoint of Arizona. So thank you. That was wonderful. That was fun. And look forward to doing it again, my friend.
Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
All right, folks. Everyone out there, thank you. And once again, this is the Coach's Corner. Take care.
Cheers.